p.m. Saturday, May the 30th, in the great city of St. Louis, the Midwest. I'd like to welcome you to Altitude Adjustment, the weekly podcast where we discuss people, politics, and professions. This afternoon, I've got as my guest Keisha Betts and Warren Harper Jr. So today's subject it has to deal with change, and change is usually slow and an arduous process. Now, change usually only happens when it becomes more painful to continue to do what you're doing. Now, there are several ways to make change occur, and we're going to talk about one of those ways coming up right now.
Welcome to Altitude Adjustment.
Well, I want to thank you guys for joining me this afternoon. There we go. Well, let's see. So today we're going to try something a little different. As you might be able to see down in the lower right-hand side, the lower left-hand side, there's a chat window. So if you type a comment, then we'll be able to see it and you can be a part of the discussion. In the future, we will be able to add your video. I want to thank Keisha and Warren for joining me this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to be here.
Very good. So we're talking about cancel culture, and some people may know or may not know what cancel culture is. But cancel culture refers to the popular practice of withdrawing support for or canceling public figures and companies after they have done or said something considered objectionable or offensive. Now, cancel culture is generally discussed as being performed on social media in the form of group shaming. Now, the beginning of cancel culture, or the beginning of the term, was credited to Black users of Twitter, where it has been used as a hashtag. As troubling information comes to light regarding celebrities who were once popular, such as Bill Cosby and Michael Jackson, Roseanne Barr, and Louis C.K., so come calls to cancel such figures. One of the, I don't know if I should start with probably the most recent, recent of cancel culture, the shaming of Joe Biden as far as his comments about people not being Black. And Warren and I have had an interesting discussion around that. And maybe we can share a little bit of that this time. But my concern with cancel culture is it seems to be a shotgun approach to implementing change. Would you agree with that? Any one of you? My microphone doesn't talk by itself. So if you, I want to welcome Leonard. My brother Leonard showed up. I appreciate you being here, Leonard. Can you hear us fine? Can you hear me fine since I'm the only one talking?
Well, let me say this as far as the expected outcome. I think different people have different views as far as expectation. Sometimes you might not be thinking about change. You just want to let them know how you feel, because some people are not going to change. So to expect change is kind of, it's a high hope.
Okay. So we've seen it. I think we've in this era of social media, we see a lot of people speaking out on different issues, and we see that a lot of people are getting fired. Many people are getting fired, or their life has been changed dramatically because of the cancel culture. And in some media outlets, there's been a how do I say, they pushed back against cancel culture because they don't feel that it is helpful in our society. Okay. They don't feel it's helpful in our society. And so is there a place for this cancel culture? Are we doing things that are actually going to benefit society as a whole?
I believe so. I feel like a lot of these things that people are doing, they've been doing before,
Mhm.
and it just hasn't been recorded. It hasn't been shown to other people, so they've been able to get away with doing these things and um, hide some of their actions that just aren't acceptable. And posting it on social media, people are able to see, okay, well, this is someone that I work with or someone that I do business with, and I've never seen this side of them. And that kind of brings to light kind of who some of these people really are, some of the things that they do behind closed doors.
Yeah, so I can see that. Pardon me. I can see that. But one of the concerns that I have with that is we're litigating society in a tweet. We're litigating behavior before we've had due process of defining people's actions, whether they deserve to be have that level of scrutiny supplied to them. So, like, we're talking, we're having a conversation, and we're um, we're exploring the concepts of of cancel culture. During this conversation, one of us can say something that quite a few people really don't like and may not really understand the full context of it. They may come into the video or you know, deep into the conversation or something, and when they hear something, they get immediately offended. They start posting that, and they call it shameful, and they say this is horrible, and then the next person doesn't. People that follow don't go back and look at the video doing that. And so that's my concern, is that we're not that this. So there is I agree that there is a good thing about people being brought to task, and those things. And Leonard just made a comment, and I'll get to that in just a second. People being brought to task, and I think that that's necessary. My biggest concern is that we're doing it in such an emotional way that we're not trying to let a process play out where a person makes a comment, makes a stumble, and then is allowed allowed to further explain themselves so that they're better understood, rather than we shame them for being misunderstood. Is that fair?
But if your stumble causes someone to lose their life, that's not just a, oh, oops, my bad. I mean, if he hadn't recorded her in the park and the cops show up and she's screaming bloody murder, I mean, we've seen what happens to African American men. The cops aren't may not necessarily ask questions. They may attack him or do harm to him, and she's just like, "Oh, my bad. I was nervous because he made a comment towards me." Like, some of these things need to be exposed. And sometimes I feel like they're just hiding behind who they who they are, I guess.
So, so do you have any like major concerns about people unfairly being tarnished? So, like, take the Biden incident. Joe Biden says, if you vote for Trump, you're not black. So in the black community, we are not a monolith. There's some people that vote conservative, there's some people that vote moderate, there's some people vote neoliberal, or whatever political lean you want to put out there. And so he made the comment that if you vote for Trump, you're not black. And in the community, Black people have said things like that. Would you agree?
Did black people have said things like that?
Right.
Oh, every day.
So,
But that's black people saying it.
right, and that was part of the issue that we had was you believe that he deserved the level of criticism that he received simply because he was probably speaking about something you didn't think he knew enough about to speak about. And
Okay.
so
And not
putting
only that, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
And not only that, if he really knew black people, I think he would have known better. And it shows how
If
Mhm.
if Black people would say, well, if you vote Donald Trump, you're not Black, and then Donald Trump says that, I mean not Donald Trump, but Joe Biden says that, what leg do we stand on? What grounds do we stand on to criticize him? If it's something that we would say, why there are things that I think Black people can say to other Black people that is not acceptable for white people to say to Black people. But how do we draw that line? How do we make it fair that when we're shaming the person, we're shaming them for something that is egregious and that without and that they should know. Now you say that they should know. I think we all know white people
I said
who
he wasn't familiar with the culture.
I think we all know white people who hang around or who have Black family or Black friends, and they make jokes of the cultural behaviors of each group. So you have a white friend, and you say to your white friend, why do white people do this or why do white people do that? And your white friend says, why do you Black people always eat chicken or something of that nature? And so there's a familiarity that they gain with each other. And then if they say that outside their group of friends, they're going to be shamed for it. They're going to be canceled by the culture at large, because while they have permission to discuss that within their small group, they don't have permission to discuss that with a group outside of the people that they hang out with.
Well, I would have to say that, it's a situation where right now everybody's so tense and wound up about current events, all this crazy stuff with Trump and the election in general, even with the Democratic Party and its, lack of unity, that people are hypersensitive and going to over scrutinize. But at the same time, I think that you know I don't consider Biden canceled by the reaction. I just feel like people are letting him know how they felt, and I don't think at the end of the day, I don't think the whole situation is going to change anybody's votes. So as far as him being canceled, I think it is what it is. I think it was he said something a lot of us didn't like. They reacted, and people will move on.
And
Maybe
here's
some people change their mind. I don't know, but I think most people have already have an opinion.
so there were people who have influence, who have several thousand followers on Facebook or on YouTube, that were saying that because Biden said what he said, that they should withhold their votes. And I understand what you're saying. is that some people are not going to make that influence their particular vote, but I think that there are people that are going to be influenced by that. And as you mentioned, a lot of it was reaction was emotional,
Hmm.
and so my concern is um, if we do a lot of emotional with this, if it becomes an emotional thing, um, that it can do a lot more harm. I won't say a lot more harm than good, but maybe it could do as much damage as it does good. Um, so there is activism happening with Black Lives Matter, and over the I think his name was George Floyd killing.
Hmm.
Yes, it that cancel culture, that people tweeting about it, people getting involved, is what drives a lot of these uh, uh, demonstrations, these
Hmm.
protests, and those protests are what's going to get done. And you can see the progression. There was the online um, there was online rage, and then that rage turned into physical protests, and that physical protest turned into action. And so you can see the good that was done there, but I can also see the potential harm that was done. I'm gonna run to Leonard's comment real quick. Um, Not being a member of the Black community, he is criticism of the way Black people folding patterns go is not acceptable. Um, so I think Leonard is saying what you were saying is that maybe he's not in touch with the community, the Black community, as to make that comment in the way that he did. And like I say, because Black people are because we're all different and we all expect different things. I personally did not see anything traumatic about his comment. I would I and I tend to be a little bit more conservative. I tend to be more um, if you say something that offends me or that causes me to rethink it, then I rather than get push back against your comment, I try to ask you, did you mean it that way? This is what I've heard. This is what I think you said, and give that person an opportunity to restate or further flush out what they were trying to say, so that I don't make my first reaction a gut reaction.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And so with me being that way, what I see with the cancel culture is that most of it is gut reaction. Not that gut reaction isn't right to some degree. It just doesn't give people an opportunity to better state their case, because now they're playing defense. So
Hmm.
Joe Biden said what he said, and then there was this big pushback, not from every Black person, but from enough Black people that he felt he had to defend himself rather than explain himself. And I
Yeah.
think we get better outcomes when there's an explanation and not a defense.
Yeah, well, it would be even better if there was an opportunity to sit down face to face and say, "Hey, look, like, what did you mean?" Or, what's going on, Joe, and have a conversation. But we all know with a celebrity or a person, a politician, somebody of that stature, it's almost impossible to get that type of relationship and have a heart to heart discussion. So all we really have is that emotional reaction that you can, push out if it really touches you. So, there's no real opportunity. but I think he needs to think think before he speaks for sure, because certain things are hot buttons with black people, and he doesn't seem to be aware of that.
Okay. Um, so I guess I can understand, where you're coming from with that, and I think that's important to understand. But at which point, or is there a point that non-African Americans can comment on African American culture?
Not if you're not part of it or don't understand it.
Yeah, that was going to be touchy because
Yeah.
right, even if they have relationships and know about the culture, they still have to be careful what they say, because that's no different than us talking about white folks. I try not to say all white folks this, all white folks that, even though in conversation we may say white folks this, white folks that. When you're speaking in public, you have to watch what you say. So that's the way it is.
Okay. So 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 Keisha says, if you don't understand the culture, how will we know when a non-African American understands the culture enough to comment on the culture? How do we get there?
That's hard. Yeah, like Warren said, that it's just that's a touchy subject. That's a gray area. Just like I would almost relate it to like a sibling. If I said my brother's stupid, he's this, he's that. If our neighbor down the street then comes and says your brother's stupid, then we're ready to fight because that's my brother. Like
Right.
we're part of one family. We know each other. We know each other's struggles, backgrounds, history. We know each other. You are on the outside. You may know us, but you do not know us. So you can't come in and now say the same comments or say, judgmental comments about us because you don't know us.
So I fully agree to some point with that. So yes, there are things that are inside jokes, and that was what I mentioned earlier. If you have a white friend, or you're a black person has a white friend, or your white person has a black friend, there are things that you can share within your group that you can't share outside of your group.
Right.
But a truth is a truth. So if I have a friend and we're laughing and joking about a different culture, why is that not okay if we have to live together as cultures? If I have to, so I'm trying to live with you. I'm trying to live with you, and your culture is different than mine. And I can't have a conversation with you about your culture. How are we supposed to blend? How are we supposed to get along? How are we supposed to get together? How are you supposed to understand my culture if I don't let you talk about my culture? If I don't give you the okay, and if we don't have a set of rules that defines when it's okay for non-African Americans to talk about African American culture, how do we get to live and work together? Or is it just we're always going to be separated into these groups?
It's one thing to ask questions about another culture or try to understand another culture, but it's different to make a prejudgment about that culture or to say all of Indian people are this way and all white people are this way. That there's a difference.
Right.
I agree with that. is there a window of opportunity? Okay, we as Black people, and I think it's got to be with any culture, critique other people in our culture. We critique their behavior. You and I have had the conversation about black hair. Black hair is a cultural thing.
Yeah.
So commenting on black hair is a generalization, right?
Asking about black hair, if
Wow,
if
we
someone
were-
outside of my culture asks me a question about my hair, that's different than someone outside of my culture saying all Black women have nappy hair.
What about so that's a negative. That's so we know that nappy is a derogative term.
Right.
It's not, our hair is not nappy, it is curly.
Right.
So we know that nappy is derogatory. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how do we bridge cultural gaps and allow one another to be able to experience the culture of another group in a way that it brings us closer together and not separates us? Because as long as I don't allow you to talk about my culture, you're always going to feel like an outsider. How do we become insiders to each other?
When
Inside.
you go ahead.
I'm not sure how to answer that one. I mean, what's an insider? What's an outsider? I would ask that.
Well, I mean, so so as you mentioned, sometimes in the course of conversation, when you're with somebody and you say white people this and white people that, well, let's just take racism.
Okay.
We say racism is a white person's issue.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
white
that's what we
person's
say.
issue. Because we can't be racist.
Because we don't have the power.
We don't have the power. So when we talk about racism, we're talking about white people.
Correct.
So if we're saying that, and white people can say, you don't know my culture. You can't call me a racist. And so I'm saying, how do we bridge those gaps so that we can resolve problems? I have to be able to talk to you. I have to be able to say to you, your behavior, I like this aspect of your behavior. I don't like this aspect of your behavior. And we all be able to recognize what that means and how that impacts us, so that we can make sure that we're building things together, so that we're coexisting and not siloing in our own worlds and saying, you can't be a part of my world because you don't understand it. I'm not saying that they don't understand it. There are some people that do, and I think we all know that there are people who are outside of our culture, who weren't born in our culture, that understand our culture.
Yeah, that's true.
So what are the markers that allow that person to be able to, because that person that you and I know, or the people that you and I know, don't know every black person. And because we know that person connects with the African American culture, they understand the African American culture enough to be able to talk about it intelligently. If they go outside of our our circle, they're going to be just fricassee if they're going to be canceled if they go outside of our group, outside of us, and make the comments that they would make to us inside of our personal conversations. Is that fair?
Well, it's possible. Whether it's fair or not, that's hard to say. I mean, um, sometimes it's best just to tiptoe lightly and watch what you say, in mixed company, because right now things are just so tense and hyped up. It's a bad situation. You have to be 10 times as careful now with so much going on. Everybody hostile, angry, you know, ready to fire off on things. So yeah, it's I guess that's one of the reasons why people aren't having a lot of conversations, because maybe some people are scared to say how they think, how they feel, or they're worried about if the person will be offended. But at the same time, if you want to get along, if you want to get to know one another, you have to have those conversations. So that's a challenge for everybody. You have to just think I think sensitively and before you say certain things, but be open to be honest.
Okay. Did you want to? So we're going to close the show. It is we hit our time limit here. And did you want to make a closing comment, Keisha?
No, I agree with Warren.
Very good.
But
Leonard.
Oh, one question. Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
one quick.
No, go ahead.
Is do you feel still that Biden is canceled, or people just
So what I
laugh
mean by
back?
canceled? So
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I didn't. Were you finished asking your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So canceled doesn't always mean that the person was fired or that the person was relegated to irrelevance. It simply means that there is such negative pushback that the person has been damaged socially
Mhm.
by the engine that is social media.
Okay.
So do I think Biden has been canceled? Absolutely. Not canceled to the point of where he's no longer relevant, but he has been damaged by that. There are
Okay.
people who are questioning their vote for him based on what has happened.
Hmm. And to that, I would just say I've been listening to people who have questioned and crossed him off long before that.
Oh, I can't disagree with that. There were people that wouldn't have voted for Biden. I don't care if he had worn a tutu and sang Christmas carols. They weren't going to vote for him.
Right. I follow Bernie, and not that I'm not bitter or upset about it, but the Bernie supporters that are, the hardcore Bernie supporters, they just he ain't even on the list. So, and then there's other people that were like just looking for an alternative, and I don't think he ever fit the bill.
Okay. Yeah. I don't. I mean, I think if we're going to discuss Biden, I think we should make that's a different political conversation.
Okay.
But so I'll make note of that, and maybe we can have that conversation a little later. I do want to mention Leonard says you go from being an outsider to an insider by first asking questions and learning, and I think we all would agree with that. It's
Exactly.
But my thought is, so you've learned, you've asked the questions, you've learned. When do you get an opportunity to have input?
Input as far as what?
So we talked about um, that you have to tread lightly if you're outside of our culture and you're making a comment about our culture. You have to tread lightly, correct?
Okay, I think I see what you're saying. As far as that goes,
Mhm.
I think uh, tread lightly again because at the end of the day, he is still a white boy. Let's put it out there. You
ah,
know,
that's my friend Warren, boy.
he's not climbing that wall that easy.
All righty.
And then one more thing, he speaks though after that when he responded after he made the comment and realized he screwed up, he started throwing out things like about all these black folks that supported him, blah blah
Mhm.
blah blah. And that just raised a lot more questions about who those people were because we don't really know that environment and the reason he was getting the support, if he was getting that support he claimed. I don't know.
I agree. Perfect.
He was deflecting.
And I said that earlier. Um, so I said that earlier is that um, oh so it jumped out of my head. All right. So you're saying so yeah, that's what it was. Biden, rather than explain himself so that we better understood what he meant, he went to the defensive
Mm-hmm.
because he's 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 trying to reach our community, and we've made so the cancel culture has made it's a weapon that says if we don't get what we want, we will make you irrelevant. And so I think rather than him being able to, than him taking the opportunity to better explain himself, he had to play defense.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I don't think defense helped him or us.
I agree with that. He didn't look any better.
He didn't look any better. It didn't help. It didn't help him, and it didn't help us. So the cancel culture, I think, can cause a lot of damage, as well as bring about some positive change. So one of the things that that I mentioned to you guys earlier was this whole ability to impact and influence what goes on in society is including people who have the potential to vote, who are voting age, who haven't registered to vote, have never voted, have no intention of voting, and yet they get a voice in the candidate that could be president of the United States. So what I mean is they jump on the bandwagon to beat up on Joe Biden. Joe Biden gets damaged. Joe Biden becomes unelectable. And this is a potential problem. And yet these people do not register to vote. They have not registered to vote, never have been registered to vote, will never probably register to vote. And they're participating in our public discourse. That's the problem I have with the cancel culture, is that how do you get a voice when we have an established method of litigating some of this stuff? And people have bypassed that. They are now participating in the public dialogue without doing the work, without going down and registering to vote. Getting up on that Tuesday morning, because I think voting is on Tuesdays, getting up on that Tuesday morning, standing in line, punching ballots, whatever it takes to make this society work. And all they have to do is have an internet connection and a Twitter account, and they're counted.
I think they're just trying to bring awareness to what's going on or sharing what's going on, not necessarily trying to have someone's reputation damaged or have their name defamed. I think they're just trying to show, like, this is what's going on. This is what's happening.
Okay.
I question sometimes how you determine a person's age based on and whether they vote based on what's online. I mean, it's where do you get the statistics from? Whether this person votes or not and what their age is.
I didn't. Okay, so I don't remember. Did I say something about age and voting?
That's what I thought I heard. You were talking about young folks who haven't registered and don't vote. I mean,
so do you? Okay, I do not know every individual that has a Twitter account, how old they are, and if they're registered to vote. That is correct. I do not know. So I do not have empirical data that shows that a lot of people who are participating in the cancel culture, in the dialogue that's going on in our society, I do not have proof that all of them have not registered to vote and do not vote. The statistics I do have is that a third of Americans registerable voters, only a third actually vote.
Okay.
So it's quite possible. It's quite possible that everybody that makes a comment on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube is a registered voter and votes. I just am not buying.
Oh no, I would say, well, we know a number of people don't vote for sure. I'm just wondering how they break down, the categories. I also hear a lot of comments about people in my age group, which I'm considered a boomer, right?
Right.
Born in the mid 50s. And I just have to step back and say, that's not me. I disagree with what you're saying about those people. Maybe a lot of them do this, do that, or think this way, think that way. But I find myself on the other side of what people seem to, the category that they put people in my age bracket in. So I guess maybe I'm just different. But I think I kind of question statistics sometimes when people say, well, yeah, they're this, they're that, and they're from that era, like a monolith, because you were a certain age.
Okay.
I think we have to be careful with that.
Okay. I at this particular point, I have a concern that a lot of people that are participating in the cancel culture, that are making comments about celebrities, about politicians, about companies, don't actively participate in the most important tool for change in our society.
Okay.
I honestly believe voting, while a lot gets done with Twitter, the true muscle for change is voting. Now, if you have a different argument for that than I do, please share it. I'd love to hear it.
No, I think basically when it comes down to certain issues, that's your only option. You know, there's not a lot of other things you can do.
Alrighty. So we are out of time. Well, we're not actually out of time. We can take a little bit more if that's necessary. But unless you guys have some more to add, I'm going to close the show.
I think I'm good.
Very good.
Same.
Excellent. I do appreciate you both joining me. Hopefully you will join me the next time. I want to thank everybody for listening in. This podcast is a weekly podcast every Saturday, 2 p.m. Central. And for the month of July is my summer vacation, so I will not be podcasting. And please visit the website for the latest information. I want to thank you very much.
All right, thanks for having me.
Thanks.
That concludes this episode, and thank
All
you
right.
for listening.
I'll talk to you guys later.
This podcast is designed for
Bye.
live listener interaction. Visit the website, thelionsdenstl.wixsite.com/home for details about how to join the conversation. The video version of Altitude Adjustment is available on YouTube. Search for Lions Den STL. And the audio podcast is available on Stitcher.com, Anchor.fm, the iTunes Store, and the Google Play Music Store, to name a few. Look for Altitude Adjustment where you get your podcast, and consider making a contribution by visiting anchor.fm/altitude-adjustment2. Remember, the internet is powered by your likes, shares, and comments. So please like, share, and comment on this and other episodes, because it matters. As always, be cool, be calm, and above all, be careful. Look out for the other guy, because they may not be looking out for you.